What is going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Sunday Reset with Will and Friends. I'm your host, Will Craig, and this is a show where we bring in people to have honest conversations around various topics, but the center core of all of this is mental health, right? So people come through different walks of life, different way of viewing things, and so I try to bring on guests to share that. And I've got a very special guest today for you all. He's become quite a good friend of mine, and I can't wait to have this wonderful, open, and honest conversation. So give me a moment. I'm going to add him to the live. And look at that. Boom. There he
What's
is.
up, brother? How are you?
I am good, my friend. How are you?
I am good as well. Let me figure this out a little bit. There we go.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, it's a funny thing with Instagram. If you're listening, Mark Zuckerberg, if you're listening, don't make it a limitation to only have Instagram lives on phones. I would love to have this on a computer or have better screens on this. So if Zuck, if you're listening, please, by all means, let me know if you're going to change that. But Mick,
Will,
friend, what's up?
what's up, brother? How are you, man?
Probably not as good as you coming off of vacation. A little bit, a little rest, a little R&R.
Absolutely. Definitely needed. I told you I'm about to go on this crazy like 10, 11 week run where I'm barely going to be home, so I needed to be ready for that. Get all the energy ready for that.
Well, I've got questions on that, but before we get started, so why don't you tell, for those who may not know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, yeah, man. I always tell people this. I'm a man now who at 10 years old made a promise to his mom to help change her life and the life of my sister, and then later when my brother was born, his life. And I'm that man that just keeps that promise every single day. So, attended the University of North Carolina, hence my Carolina blue today. I think we have a game at some point later today, or maybe we're not in the tournament anymore. Not joking. We're not in the tournament anymore. Attended the University of North Carolina, started my adult life in the insurance space as a sales manager, then an agency owner, a business owner, and I've been a serial entrepreneur ever since. But my passion is always delivering upon the promises that I make to my family, my close circle. And more importantly, man, just continuing to build a legacy that those that follow me can be proud of. And that's literally who I am and what I do every day.
And I can 100% say that with certainty. Just in the short time that I've gotten to know you, you stand on that every chance of the way. Like from the moment we started talking, like I was like, who am I to this guy? But Mick has been nothing but supportive, understanding, wants to help, comes with a genuine authenticity that it's just real. You see so often in these on social media and stuff like that, people want to portray authenticity, but I've been really happy to see what I've seen with you so far, just that you actually live it every single day.
That's all I can do, man. Like we're built on the world to be us and to hopefully make an impact. And that's what I literally try to do every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the promise that you made to your mother and your brother, and I'm curious, could you tell me a little bit about, what exactly that promise is, where it stems from, and how do you try to live that every single day?
Yeah. So, when I was 10, it wasn't uncommon for me at 10 years old to see my mother go through some type of an abuse every day, right? It literally was not uncommon. And then my sister, who, was 3.5, 4 years younger than me, also going through, somewhat similar, I say emotional abuse, right? Because for children to see your mother go through that, it's also emotionally tormenting. And so, I made a promise at 10 to my mom and my sister that I was going to figure something out so that didn't have to be the thing anymore. Um, and, I fulfilled, I like to say I fulfilled that promise. I wanted to show my mom that she could be in a better place emotionally and physically, and financially. And I wanted to show my sister what a, a father was supposed to be, what a father figure was supposed to be, and someone that she could look up to from a male perspective. And then when my brother was born, who was born when I was 18, I wanted to show him those same things, but more importantly, also teach him what it is like, right? For a daughter, for your sister, you're more showing the things that they should look for in others, right? Well, for your brother, you got to show him what he's supposed to actually be,
Right.
right? And so that's what literally I do every day, man. And then, when I had kids, showing them the same thing, showing my daughter this is what a male should look like, showing my boys like this is who you're supposed to be. These are the things that you're supposed to do. There comes a time in life where everything isn't always fun and games. There's responsibilities that we have, and I will honestly say, as men and as leaders of our household, there are responsibilities that we're supposed to have. And so I wanted to show my brother that, and show my boys that same thing. That hey, the buck has to stop with you, right? And I have this story my grandfather told me. Me being the oldest grandson, he's like, your cousins cry up to each other. Ultimately, they cry to you. You cry to your grandmother. Your grandmother cries to me. Who do I cry
Right.
to? Right? I was like, wow, that's some perspective right there. And so, understanding that, in the household, like that's what I'm supposed to be. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much to unpack there. But first I want to say you talk about like what the role kind of is. Like I think about the first is like your sister and your daughters and people, the women in your life. When you think about that, what does that mean to you? What kind of traits should one have to be a good man to someone, to a woman?
Yeah. So, we're in 2025 now. So I'm gonna say I talk to business leaders about this, but I think also for husbands, for guys, being emotionally intelligent, being in touch with that side of you that before you react, think, right? Before you respond, think about how the reaction could be taken. And so I think for me, that's first and foremost is just understanding the emotional side of humans, and the emotional side of relationships. Um, and doing that. So for me, for all the guys out there that are listening or watching, it's about that piece. It's being in touch with the emotional side, because and I don't mean this just for females, but like we all are emotional creatures, right? And so when you're in that relationship, again, whether it's your children, whether it's your spouse, the emotions that are going to come into it, you've got to be able to first and foremost understand that piece. And I think that's where guys go wrong. So I'd say that's first. And then two, being able to make the decision. You don't have to make all the decisions, right? In my household, I don't make all the decisions. I can promise you that.
I can guarantee that.
Right.
I can
I don't
guarantee
make all the
that.
decisions, but there are decisions that you are going to have to make, and they're going to be different in every scenario, every situation, every household is going to be different. But not being afraid to make the decision, and by the decision, I mean the right decision, not the popular decision, not the decision that's going to make everyone happy, not the decision that you think people want to hear. It's making the right decision. And sometimes the right decision is no, or not right now, or let's wait, or let's plan, right? And so I think those are the two things that I make sure that with my boys, with my brother, that we understand. One, the emotional intelligence side of life. And then two, not being afraid to make the decision.
Yeah, I mean, the decision piece is something I want to get back to at some point, but the emotional intelligence really stands out to me because I think especially some of it could depend on like where you grew up, but I think, I grew up in the Midwest where it's like as guys we didn't talk about our feelings in that
Right,
way. It was a lot of that, bottling up, let's talk
right,
about it later or,
right.
something else. And so when I think about like the modern man in 2025 and looking forward, we've proven that doesn't work. The largest rate of suicide growth in the United States is middle-aged men.
Right,
So
right,
we're losing. We're
right.
losing that battle that way. We have to find a different path. So when you say that, that's what it opens up my mind and goes, well, no, we have to find a different way. So what would be your advice if I was brand new to exploring emotional intelligence? What would be your first piece of advice?
First is know yourself, know your strengths, um, understand the decisions that make who you are, right? And how you react to things now. Because part of being emotionally intelligent means you have to know your emotions first, right? So I'm going to say definitely the first step, Know you. Don't be afraid to sit down, almost like you said, right? Like it's okay to talk about things. It's okay to not have the answers to the test, right? Being emotionally intelligent doesn't mean that you're soft. It doesn't mean that you have to have all the answers or the right answers. It just means we're going to think, right? We're going to feel before we respond. We're going to look at all the angles and understand where things are coming from before we respond. Because at the end of the day, Will, you know this. Life is tough, man. Like things we go through things in life. Things happen to us in life. Um, you know, if everything worked out, right, everybody would be billionaires,
Right.
but it doesn't, right? And so your emotional intelligence is how you going to handle it when the stuff gets hard. How are you going to handle it when the stuff is great? How do you keep the great good when it's going? But most importantly, man, it's like how are you going to handle the adversity that is going to come, right? People say death, taxes, and whatever. I say it's death, taxes, and adversity, right? Like
Right.
those are the three guarantees that you're always gonna have in life. And so, being emotionally intelligent, again, start with understanding who you are, right? Look at the situations before you move. Don't be afraid to talk to others, and know that it doesn't mean you're soft. You're just gonna think before you move. That's all.
See, and that's what I mean. Like that one piece about the softness. I somehow we got down this path among men specifically, where we thought, where we're taught like this whole kind of, you see this almost like alpha
Hmm.
rhetoric that goes around. And I'm not against taking a leadership stance as a man, but what I am troubled by is all these people that's like that, to them it's like suppressing every emotion that you may possibly have,
Right.
and that you're somehow above it or anything else.
Right.
It's like that's that's a losing recipe. That's
Hmm.
a losing game plan.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, it will catch up to you at some point in time. And so I love what you said about just take a pause for a second. Like, let someone says, you're out at a bar with some friends, someone says something that you don't particularly like. Maybe your gut reaction, especially if you've had a couple of drinks, is, I saw someone in the comments there say like get into a fight, right? That's
Right.
your gut. It's your gut visceral reaction.
Yeah.
But tactically, is that what's going to get me the best possible outcome? And the reality is, when you can take a step back and pause, you go, I don't even know that dude. I don't care anything about his life. I'm probably never going to see him again.
Right.
So why is he worth any more of this time? A great quote I wish I wrote was, someone said, like, if it's not going to bother you in 5 years, why would you let it bother you for more than 5 minutes? That
Amen.
That's what I mean. So it's like, so I love that, taking that step back there, getting in touch with that. But then it's also, getting in touch with those things when you are feeling some type of way, whether it's sadness or getting into grief. So you're talking about adversity. So someone passes away, as a man, like getting in touch with those feelings and understanding what they are also gives you a chance to find the strength to deal with them in an appropriate way and
Yep.
move forward. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so like when you think about some of the stuff from your upbringing, it sounds like there were some challenges there in
Yeah.
your household, and you kind of took up the mantle there. So how did you know, get in touch with your emotions to navigate through that?
Yeah. So it was understanding the triggers, right? So when there would be certain times or situations where I could see that, my dad was going to have a response or a trigger to my mom. And so when I started understanding that, and again, I'm 10 years old, I said, okay, how do I take this pressure off my mom and put it on me? And I'm not going to say every time, right? But when I could see that something was building, I would have a reaction so that then the energy, the focus would come on me. Because if I'm prepared, I know I can handle it, right? Like if I'm preparing for the situation to come, if I'm preparing to get yelled at or to get cursed at or to do whatever, then I'm not really accepting it. It's just, it was a game for me. It was like, okay, you're not going to upset my mom. You're not going to upset my sister. You'll just do it with me. Right. And so that became my way of just saying, all right, I understand the triggers. Right. I, I know that at the time, the two most important people in my life were my mom and my sister. Right. And so it was, I'm going to protect at all costs. So for me, that was the emotional side, was just saying, I'm gonna bear the torment. I'll bear the whatever because I'm prepared to handle it. Right.
So Okay, go ahead.
No, 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 no. Like literally, that was it. And then when my brother was born later, when I was in college, like I would come home to do the same thing, right? It's like, okay, I'm gonna handle the torment, the angst, the anger, or whatever because I'm built for it.
Yeah. So it sounds like you had a great, stance of how to protect your family and do those things. So, but now you're a grown man, you got your own kids.
Yeah.
And if you could go back and talk to that 10-year-old you, what's the first thing you would do or say?
I don't know, Will. So you're my friend, right? So I
Yeah.
always tell people I don't do those things. I don't go back and do like absolute impossibles, right? Like I can't go back to my 10-year-old self. But what I tell other so I speak at boys and girls clubs, right? What I tell them is don't accept your situation as normal. Because when you accept the situation as normal, you accept that it's okay. And whatever that curse is, you're not going to break it. Whatever that situation is, you're not going to break it. You're going to accept it. And then you're going to either do one of two things: go into a shelter, meaning a closed version of yourself, or you're going to have outbursts, right? There's that's it, right? That's one. There's only two ends of the coin.
Right.
You're going to withdraw, or you're going to have outbursts. So don't accept it as normal, and then prepare for it. So if I were to talk to a 10-year-old that were in that situation that I was in, if I could tell them anything, it is just continue to move forward. Like continue to put one foot in front of the other every day, because everything that you're doing is working, right? Everything you're doing, all the situation you're in, the good book says we're never in a situation that we can't bear, right? The reason that you're in it is because you're the one chosen to get out of it, right? And so just keep pushing through. But I will also say talk to others, because other people are going through it too, which is something I didn't do when I was 10, 11, 12, up to my 20s, right? I didn't talk to others about it because I was so laser focused on solving the problem that I didn't talk to others. And so I didn't know if anyone was going through that same thing. Pretty sure now other friends of mine were going through things in their household too. So I would definitely say talk to others about it, because you'd be surprised at what goes on. And that's what I do when I'm speaking with youths, right? Let's talk about it. You'd be surprised. Something you're going through, someone else is going through, and maybe it takes you speaking up to get others to talk about it. And then you create a community, and then you create power within the community.
It's almost like I prepared you to say that because like it's so funny. So with my book, the title of my book is One Step Forward, I Do in the Right Direction. And more often than not, people hear the title and they think it's in reference to, and people, yeah, that's the best part about literature is you can interpret it your own way. But a lot of people think it means like one foot in front of the other, take a step, you're going to step off the path. That's okay. That's a great way to interpret it. Definitely some truth to that. But when
Hmm.
I first conceptualized the idea of one step forward, to me, it was in reference to this, exactly what you were just saying. I think people want to be vulnerable. I think people want to share. I think people want to put themselves out there in the world. The problem is it's a really, really scary thing.
Hmm.
And so because of that, they need somebody to raise their hand
Right.
first. So because if they do it, it like subconsciously gives them that ammunition. It's like, okay, no, no. Now that they've done it, I feel good with it too. There's a great adage about Roger Bannister breaking the 4 minute mile,
Hmm.
where is they said it couldn't be done. They said it was never going to be done. He goes, he breaks it 3:59. He gets there, and then within years, a few years, multiple people did it.
Yep.
So for the entire history of competitive running, we didn't believe this marvel was possible. Then as
Hmm.
soon as someone did it, now all of a sudden it's
Right.
commonplace. And we can speak to the innovations and growth and physical training, but at the end of the day, part of that had to be mentally because someone crossed the barrier first. Now we're all believing it's possible, and then we can do that. So I love that
Yep.
message too about opening up to each other.
Yep. Wholeheartedly, man. I mean, in life, we definitely have to do that. And for all the guys out there, again, it doesn't mean you're soft, right? It just means those are the things. I didn't for a long time, and it wasn't because I felt like I was going to be soft. I just was trying to figure stuff out, right?
Right.
But if I would have been able to talk to others, I might have figured it out faster, and that was the key.
I was gonna say, yeah, you said were you bringing that up in reference to like talking to kids, but I think that's a lesson for everybody, especially guys.
Yeah.
We are so hard headed, and we can't get over the idea of asking anybody for help or bringing up anything. We're just gonna deal with it ourselves. I'm just as guilty of that as anybody. I am someone who first one to help anybody anytime I can,
Hmm.
but asking anybody for help still to this day, no matter how much I like to think
Yeah.
I'm emotionally involved,
Yeah.
is still so hard. Even just like talking to you, how many times in our conversations have I been like, no, man, I don't want to bother you, or like,
Right.
no, I don't want to bring it up. No, you're
Right.
not. And you're like, dude, I want to be here.
Exactly. Exactly. I wouldn't respond. Trust me. It's easy to not respond.
Exactly, exactly. So I want to take it back a little bit to something else you brought up, though. Something else you're talking about as a man, in society, is like making the decision. I thought
Yep.
that was a really interesting word choice, of making the decision. Can you elaborate a bit more about like what you mean when you say the decision?
Yeah. Everything that we do in life comes down to two things: decisions and choices. And we make them, we have them in front of us every single day. Right. And so I think making the right decision based on the choices, options, or whatever that are in front of us is what's critically important. And I think for me, what I teach my boys and my brother is you never want to go back and say you either didn't make a decision or that you made the wrong decision. Right now, are you going to make 100% of the right decisions? No, but you can't be afraid to make them. Right.
Yeah,
And I think to me, that's the biggest regret, because I mean, the saying, indecision is also a decision.
yeah,
Right. Well, when you have people that are counting on you, people that are looking for the advice or looking for the answer or looking for the whatever, the ball's in your hand, and you've got to be able to make the decision. And so for me, that's what I teach. That's what it's about for me. It's all right, what information do I have? And every decision isn't Grandice that you need to research for 5 days before you give an answer, right?
right.
But you do need to be able to make informed decisions, right? Again, it's 2025. Now you can type something in and you can get 5 days worth of decisions in 30 seconds now. Right?
Oh yeah, with
But
ChatGPT, hell
right,
yeah.
right, right. But just not being afraid to make a decision, not being afraid to make a stance. I tell this to husbands, and I'm not a relationship therapist by any stretch of the imagination, nor do I try to be. But when me and my guys are together and we talk about things, one of the things I always say is, there's always going to be a moment where your kids are looking to you to make a decision. They're looking at how you make the decision. They're looking at how you articulate that decision. And the same thing with your significant other. There's a time that they are looking to you to have the answer, to make the decision. Don't be afraid, right? Like, don't be afraid. And I see it a lot, believe it or not, man. Like, you think, oh yeah, I can make decisions. Right. Okay. Wife might ask, "What's for dinner? Where do you want to go?" Something that simple. It's like, "I don't care, babe, whatever you want to do." And then you just spent 45 minutes deciding where you want to go, and then both of you end up eating a bowl of cereal because you couldn't decide anything, right? Oh, that was just me in my house. My bad. That was me last night. Uh, but but no, man, like, making the decisions is just got to be a fabric of who you are. Um, not being afraid, being able to make the decision and stand by it. Right? That's probably the better part. Make the decision and then stand by the decision that you made.
Yeah. And I would add to that, then it's also about like, you're not gonna bat 1,000. Nobody does.
No.
But stand by your decision. Yeah. Learn from it when you make a mistake. And I would say also just having the confidence to know that like at some point, this was actually a piece of advice that a really good friend of mine, Chris Molina, gave to me. Shout out to Chris, who's probably not watching this, but he'll check it out later. Chris told me this little piece of advice when I was writing the book. He said the hardest part about writing a book, and I said this to people yesterday at a book event. The hardest part about writing a book, in my opinion, is it could always you could always tweak it. You could always change one thing. There's always more to add. There's always something. But at a certain point, you have to say, done is better than perfect.
Correct.
Because perfect is a vantage point. Perfect is just whatever you think. But, and I would say the same thing is true for musicians. I would say the same is true for, at a certain point, you got to go, you know, and let the chips fall where they may. And then, maybe down the road, you try something else different and you go a different way with it. But at a certain point, you got to start acting. I think that's where I see a lot of, not just men, I would say people kind of falter in life today is we have all the world at our fingertips now. And so indecision is becoming kind of rampant among people because there's just too many options. You see in the dating pool where like they can go on an app and find somebody at no problem. You know, restaurants, instead of knowing the handful of places in your town, it's I go on Google and I got 25 options, and then people just get overwhelmed by choice. And I see the place that it stands out to me, like when I first think of this, is like I'll have friends come visit, or I'll come visit friends out of town, and you have this like weird pressure where you want your friend to have the best time possible when they're with you, and vice versa. When you visit them, they want you to have the best time possible. When in reality, the best time is just spending time together. It doesn't matter the venue where we're at. We can go to this restaurant, we can go to that bar, we can go to the park, we can go to the beach. It's not really about the venue. It's about, obviously, if they want a landmark or something they want to check off their list, by all means. But outside of that, the venue is kind of irrelevant. It's about spending that quality time together. So as long as it's conducive to that, that's all that really matters. So just make a choice and go.
Totally agree. Yeah. Totally agree, man.
So then if being able to, how would you coach somebody if you were trying to like give someone advice on like being a better decision maker?
Yeah. So if we're saying being a better decision maker, then I'm going to tell you again, have the information that you need in front of you, right? And here's the deal. The path of least resistance isn't always the right decision, right? So think through outcomes. So have the informed decision or the informed opinions or the advice or the information. And then think of the outcomes. So what happens if I choose A, B, or C, right? And then go through it from there. And that it's as simple as that, right? It doesn't have to be complex in making decisions. What information do I have? And what's the outcome going to be? And if you can't think through the outcome, right? Well, then maybe there's more things wrong than you actually can agree on or think through. But simple things. Again, we were just talking about dinner. So where are we going to dinner, right? All right, what are the options I have, right? I can go through that pretty quickly. If I choose A, B, or C, what happens? Did we have those last night, right? Did we have those the night before? Are they even open on Sundays, right? Thinking through that, will wife be happy, right? Cool. Then we're going to be, and I'm going to say we're going to be with confidence, right? And then if my kids are with me, they see me make that decision, right? They know, oh, Dad's confident. This is where Dad's going. We're out the door in 20 minutes, right? But something as simple as that, man, like decision making doesn't have to be complex. And I think that's where a lot of times we get in trouble is we feel like, oh, well, we've got to have this complex strategy to make a decision. Nope. What data is in front of you? What can the outcomes be? And again, can I live with it when I make it? And if the answer to the last two are yes, then I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, man. It's funny. I made a video about this forever ago, but I was talking about, I said, you know, the old phrase that everyone loves to use is I'm playing checkers instead of chess. Man, sometimes in life, I want people to get back to playing chess. Not everything needs to be thinking 10 moves in advance. Sometimes it really is just let's make a decision and go.
Right.
And I love the point you made about confidence because I think something that really makes me sad to see in life, maybe you agree with this too, is that you see people that you know are intelligent, you know they're so capable and all those things, but they just doubt themselves. They have all the tools to succeed. They just doubt themselves and they don't put themselves out there and they don't put themselves in a place to be vulnerable because either it's inability to make decisions or analysis paralysis. And I just feel for those people.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to reach out and be like, just at a certain point, like believe in yourself. And I think the secret sauce to believing in yourself in that way is there's a great story about, I think it was LAPD, something like that, from the bomb squad. And they were asking the guy, he's like, you have one of the most stressful jobs in the world.
Mm.
You defuse bombs for a living, right? You defuse these things. How do you deal with the stress of like clipping the wire or whatever? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
You know what he said?
What's that?
Goes, it's not really that stressful. I'm either right or suddenly it's not my problem anymore.
Very true. Very true.
You know, like at a certain point, to your point earlier about indecision, that will make the decision for him whether he likes it or not. So I'm either going to make this decision or I'm going to live with whatever ramifications come with it. But it is going to happen one way or another. I can either be a controlling factor in that, or I cannot. The choice is mine. I trust the ball in my hands to get it done. And if I'm wrong, I can live with it.
No.
But what I can't live with is letting the clock run out.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, totally agree with that, man. And a lot of times we live by too many cliches, right? Like here's another thing when it comes to decision making, right? You're going to hear people tell you, well, you can't make the decision on your feelings. You got to remove your feelings from the situation. No, you don't. Not every, like some decisions you actually do need to have feelings involved, right? Like not to take
We're
it
not
there,
robots.
but right. Like not to take it there, but what happens when you've got to put your parents in a nursing facility because they can no longer care for themselves, right? Well, that's putting feeling into that, right? That's putting emotion into that decision. So maybe not all decisions you should have feelings involved or whatever, but 100% of the time you just can't remove feelings from the decisions that you make. Sometimes you actually need them.
Yeah.
They actually will help you make better decisions when you do put your feelings in.
Well, it goes back to that emotional intelligence piece, like being in tune with that. If you think the less emotional decision is the correct one, but then when you decide you're going to start making it, it feels wrong. If you're not in tune with yourself emotionally, how are you ever going to be prepared to like navigate what those feelings are? And like you said, you'll end up making the wrong decision ultimately because you didn't factor that into the equation.
Right.
Oh man, I could go down this rabbit hole for a while, but while I've got you, I'd be remiss to talk. I want to talk to you about Mick Unplugged specifically, because I know you've done a number of things in business, but Mick Unplugged is just such a cool story to me of like, you know, you tell me a little bit about how it came about and where it's at today. Because for those who don't know, we didn't do a nice plug at the beginning of this. That's on me. Last time I checked, it's the number 26 podcast on Apple Podcasts. You always talk about top self-improvement, but I'm talking about all of Apple Podcasts. It's in the top 30.
Yeah.
It's ahead of the Kelsey brothers and New Heights.
Yeah.
Like how anybody who's aspiring, and I know I got a buddy on here who's got his own podcast who's signed with congrats Todd for listening. How did this even happen? How did you get here? What could any of us learn from that?
Yeah, so I'll answer the latter first. How did I get here? Yeah. And you know this, Will, right? When I started my podcast, I wasn't trying to start a podcast. I just wanted to do more YouTube content. Like literally, I just wanted to do some longer form YouTube content. And two of my best friends, shout out to Ryan Hanley, Daniel Song, they both have podcasts. And they're like, dude, you should do a podcast. I was like, nope, I'm going to do YouTube videos because if I don't like it, I can stop it at any point. And they were like, no, you can stop a podcast at any point too. And I'm like, but it's going to take so long, the editing. Like I can literally just press record on my phone and put up a YouTube video. So I was no for 6 months. Hard no. Talked to my mentor, Les Brown, and he was like, you should do a podcast. And I was like, Les, I don't want to. He goes, I'll be your first guest. I was like, wait a second. That's different, right? Talked to my buddy, my GOAT, Kenny Anderson. Shout out to Kenny Anderson, Georgia Tech phenom, former NBA All-Star. He was like, Mick, I'll be on your podcast. Merrill Hodge was like, I'll be on your podcast. I was like, all right, I'm going to do a podcast. But I'm going to release one episode a month because I have 4 people that will be on the podcast now. That will give me enough time to find 8 more to put out 8 episodes in a year. The Les Brown episode dropped, the Kenny Anderson episode dropped, and then people out of the woodworks were like requesting to be on the podcast. And I was like, oh, this might not be as hard as I thought it was to find guests to be on the podcast. And then I told you about my buddies Daniel and Ryan who told me I should start it. After like 2 months, Daniel comes up to me and is like, Mick, you've got like the number 150 podcasts in self improvement. I was like, where do you see that at? And so he shows me his phone, he shows me Apple rankings. So literally that day I was 150. The next day I was like 70 something. I'm like, what in the world? Like, what am I don't understand how this works. So I got on the phone, talked to Apple Podcasts, took like an hour to find someone to talk to.
Yeah.
And they were telling me the different things that I had going on. I was like, okay, cool. A few weeks later, I'm in the top 10 of self improvement. And I had a run where I was number one till Mel Robbins changed categories a few weeks ago. But anyway,
Wow, Mel, way to
right.
go.
Yeah, it was Mel. It was Mel's fault. But no. But then I realized that I should run my podcast like a business and not a side project. And so 4 months into the podcast, I really started setting up formulas and systems for myself of this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to do it. A month later, we reached 1 million downloads. So in like 5.5 months, I'll round up to 6 months, we reached 1 million downloads. Month 7 through now, and our podcast is exactly a year old. Month 7 through now, we've hit 1 million downloads plus per month, right? Um, but I run it like a business.
You do.
I truly run it like a business, right? Like one of those things. I'm as competitive as they come. So once I found out there was a ranking system, I was like, all right, cool, let's go to the top, right? But no, I say that jokingly. My podcast is about my guest, right? Like I probably ask 5 to 7 questions an episode, but it's all about my guests. And they're not the same questions, right? It's all about what's going on with the guests and what they're doing. But I make sure I highlight my guests and that we're giving the audience tips that they can put into their life or business like right then and there. You don't have to go read a book. You don't have to go join a community. You don't have to pay for a course. Like every episode, we're giving you tangible things that you can be doing in your life right now.
That's what it's about. I mean, if you come to this with a mission of success, I feel like that's usually a recipe for disaster. Any success I have ever found in any of these avenues has come from the fact that, like, at first and foremost, above anything else, I care about helping people.
Correct.
I care about making the world a better. Like, this all started for me, for those who maybe have joined with me later in life when they found me on social media. I started with blogging before any of this.
Mm.
This was back in 2019, 2018. 2018, I was sitting there, I was in a career transition. I was going through that moment, and I'd come really far in dealing with a lot of my personal demons. And when I think about those moments, I was like, man, the worst part of all of this was I felt so alone. I felt like nobody was going to understand. Going back to our earlier conversation about talking to people about stuff, I just felt like nobody was going to understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And so I put myself in this position where I was like, all right, well, thankfully, one of the few like actual talents I have in this life is that I generally don't care what people think about me. And so it's like, what a waste of that talent if I don't put it out there. So I
Yeah.
started with the day that my girlfriend passed away out of nowhere. I walked through that day, and that was the first blog post. And I remember, like, I got 500 clips in like 12 hours, clicks in like 12 hours. And I was like, what the heck? How did this even happen? And then I just started, I was like, all right, I'm going to go through, I'm going to write about what's important to me, what's going on in my mind, what's happening to me, and make people feel less alone. And then that led to writing a book, which then led to podcasts and social media. But it all came from a place of, how do I meet people where they want to be met, to have conversations that matter to me? Because I want someone to, at the core of all of it, I want someone to feel less alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think you and I share that mission, where it's like, you are in this, yeah, you've had massive success, but like the core never changed for you. Yeah, you're competitive, you want to tweak, you want to do some things to like optimize, but the core of all of it is, I want to help people. I want them to have tangible, something to walk away with, and I want them to feel better when they're done listening.
Yeah, bro. I mean, for me, it's about making an impact, right? Like I don't want to leave this earth and not have been able to impact someone or multiple people. Um, because to me, that's what life is about. Like this earth isn't a one person earth. You know what I mean? Like success isn't meant to be one. The top of the mountain actually fits a lot of people. If you ever been to the top of a mountain, a lot of people fit up there, right?
It's not a
So
zero-sum game. Shocker. I know. It's weird.
right. Yeah, you're not standing on one foot on this tiny little crest on the mountaintop, right? Like 5,000 people can stand on top of a mountain, man. So like my thing is like inspire others, uplift others, impact others. And for me, like, and I probably have never told you this, but you know, the biggest fear that I actually have in life is that when I do pass, right? And I don't care what religion you believe in or not, but whenever I get to the other side, I don't want to meet the person I was supposed to be, right? Like I want to be that person. And does it happen every day? No, it doesn't, right? Like none of us have perfect days. But I want to make sure that the sum of the day is better than it is bad. And if I can control that, then that's what I do. And for me, it's about impacting, uplifting, and inspiring others.
I think the kids would say that's a bar. I think that's the phrase that you just hit me in my soul right there with the idea of meeting the person you were supposed to become.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
And that's what I word it a bit differently. Like for me, so much of it is about like you're always going to have to some degree of regret because you could wonder what if a million times
Yeah.
over. I like that you called that out earlier about like I don't like to go down the hyperbole like what could have happened if I
Yeah.
had done this. It's not a reality that you can live in, but I do try to act with intentionality to say I want to look back and all the pieces laid out in a way that like I don't regret where I'm at today. If at any point in time I find myself in a position where I don't like where I'm at today,
Yeah.
that's when I have
Yeah.
regret. And so, whew, but that's a great way to word that and message. So moving forward now, I mean, how do you go about trying to achieve that mission today? I mean, you've obviously been very successful both on the business side, but then on the podcast, how do you try to have that? What's that look like for you now in terms of evolution to make impact?
Yeah. So I'm going to continue to work with youth, continue to work with athletes, continue to work with leaders, right? Like that's always going to be the jam of what I do. But now, man, like I'm going to start a podcast network. I'm going to help others do this too because if you are taking your podcast serious, if you are trying to run it like a business, there are things that you've got to do to monetize and actually make money, right? Like there's people that are going to tell you you can do 5 things and make $100,000 a year, make 6 figures. Well, I make 6 figures a month on mine, right? So everybody can do the math on that. And it's advertising partners, sponsorship partners. I know what they look for, and I want to help others get there. And so I want to create a network where we have the same systems, the same processes, and everybody's making money like almost moment one. Because if you're doing it to monetize, if you're doing this as your business, as your source of income, you should, right? First off, you should. And then two, like let's go do it together. So I don't know what I'm gonna call it yet. Meeting with my attorney this week coming up to figure out, what trademarks are out there, but have an idea. But the Mick Unplugged network, the Unplugged Media Network, something around that is gonna be the network. And then I want the biggest, the baddest, the smallest, the baddest, the regular, the baddest. But I keep saying baddest. I want the baddest podcasters on this planet to be a part of this network, man.
I love to hear it, man. I love to hear it. I, because even that, in the spirit of just you saying that, the way you're talking about it is still, yeah, you're talking about monetization. You're talking about, the ideas of success from a commercial standpoint, but like the mission is still there, even for you. Like you don't have to do that. You could just keep killing it on your own
Wholeheartedly can.
and make plenty of money and not have to worry about anything and do that. But you still are like, no, how do I lift up the next generation? How do I get other people up on top of this mountain?
Right.
And yeah, there's a commercial aspect of it. It's pushing people, it's making them better, but you're still in the mission of I'm gonna lift you up because I can.
Yeah. Like, trust me, when I started the podcast a year ago, I thought the only people that made money podcasting were Joe Rogans and Mel Robbins. Really. Joe. Rogan, Mel Robbins. I thought everybody else was doing it for fun, unless you were like a celebrity and it was like a way to do whatever. But when I realized that the average person like me could make money in podcasting, I said, okay, if there's money that can be made, let's go make the money, right? And it's not that money's the driver. It's just if this can become a full-time gig for me or for other people, why not? Right? Like the media world is crazy. We saw what podcasting did this election, right? Like it is the new format to do things. We see almost every retired athlete starts a podcast now. Why? Because you don't have to wait for ESPN or TNT or TBS or whatever. Like you are your own media outlet. And I think people need to understand that. It took me a while, but I embraced it. Like you are your own media outlet, right? Like without FCC regulations, meaning you can talk about whatever the heck you want to talk about, when you want to talk about it, where you want to talk about it, right? Why wouldn't you do that?
That's where I swear, like that's where all of it started for me. Like it was, I have done everything independently on my own because like at no point in history, like my favorite thing in the world that happened in my life that like I never saw coming was like when the book came out. I remember I posted it on Facebook, and my sixth grade teacher, shout out to Mrs. Mattingly, like commented and was like, "I remember you when you were 12 saying you were going to write a book."
Mm-hmm.
She's like, "You said you told me that when you were 12 years old. I'm going to write a book, and here you are doing it." And because at no point in history could you ever have just self-published a book and just went out there and did it. No one's stopping
Yeah.
you, you know. And so there's so many levers. And so same with podcasting. To your point, if you wanted to get into the media world, you basically had to go radio, or you had to go to television, or you had to find a way in. And so many of those roles are gay kept, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
know somebody to even get a spot to audition for those things. You could build your own thing
Yeah.
and build it and watch it grow. And then what happens? Like,
Yeah.
and then there's nothing stopping you from still going to ESPN
Mm-hmm.
and doing that later on, or doing something else, but you created your own path. So I truly identify with that mission. That's where all of this comes from for me, is just a place where I can have real meaningful conversations that I care about. But I think it's also important because like I'm sure people can get lost a little bit in the message because they heard the number you said on how much money you're making and all this, and they're like, well, see, they're just in it for the money. They're just in it for the money. Like it's just all about commercial success for them. They don't actually care about any of us. And my call out to that is commercial success to me, when you're someone who cares about the mission, is a means to an end. It's a means to an end to say, to your point, like right now, I have a day job
Mm-hmm.
and I do all this stuff on the side because I have to earn an income to
Right.
live my life. If I can
Right.
find a way to make money doing the things that I'm most passionate about and carrying out the mission that I care about, then I don't have to do it in the few hours I have between work, sleep, and trying to care about my relationship with my wife. I can actually make it a focal point. So I admire
Yeah.
anybody who can find a way to do that. So shout out to you for making that happen. And you want to make it happen for other people.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, your numbers tell you who you are, right? Like the listeners that you have, the rankings that you have, that stuff isn't made up. That stuff isn't purchased, right? Like, trust me, advertisers know. Like, there's a lot of metrics to see what's real data, what's not real data. So, I think it's important for people to understand it's not me, it's not Will like saying, "Oh, look, this is where you can go." Like the value of your content is always going to tell you what you can achieve. And so for me, that's what I just make sure is that I'm impacting people. And the results of that are the results of that. But the mission is always clear. The mission is always the same. Like we are trying to uplift people and businesses every episode.
Yeah, there's a really smart guy I heard recently who said it's not a microphone that makes you a speaker, it's your impact that does. Have you ever heard that? Have you ever heard that quote
I
before?
have.
Yeah,
I have.
you know who might have said it?
I don't know, but we should look him up though. We should
We
look
should,
him
we
up.
should, I should get him on the show. I should get him on the show, man.
Carolina Blue guy over there. Yes, sir.
Ah, absolutely, man. All right. Well, I've kept you now for close to an hour. We've covered a lot of great topics, and you told me what's next on you. But if people could walk away from this episode with one thing, what would you want them to walk away with?
Win every day. Like literally win every day. When you focus on the moments of each day, that's your track record for success. Right? And it's got to be earned every day. That's why I focus on winning each day. So that would be my thing: is put all your energy in winning today. Nothing else is promised or guaranteed.
Success isn't owned; it's leased, and the rent is due every day.
Every day.
Every day. I love it, man.
Yes,
I love
sir.
it. I'm so glad to have met you and connected with you on this. If you only caught the tail end of this or only caught a little bit of it live, this will be up later tonight on Spotify and Apple Pod, or sorry, not Apple Podcasts. At some point, it will be on Apple Podcasts. I just haven't gotten there yet. But it will be on YouTube. And for folks listening, be successful every single day. Find your own message for success. Let's get after it together. Mick, it is always a pleasure talking to you, my friend. And if you want to find him, Mick Unplugged on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and where else?
Mick Hunt Official is my website, but yeah, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, that's where I spend a lot of my time. But Will, brother, I just want to thank you for having me on, and we're about to do it on Mick Unplugged soon too. So I get to put Will in the hot seat. Can't wait for that one.
Oh, I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. I get to do it just like you. I get to come back from a vacation and then have a nice sit down with a friend. So I'm really
Absolutely.
appreciated, man.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you,
See
brother.
you, man.
Later.
Bye, everybody.